everyone. Welcome to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. I'm Melissa Albers.
And I'm JJ Parker. This podcast is for seekers, seekers of happiness and joy, seekers of a centered approach to success in life, seekers of their true, authentic selves.
Get ready for some real talk on everything from anxiety, emotions, and habits to love, compassion, and forgiveness. We know you'll be challenged and enlightened by this conversation. We're so glad you're here. Let's dive in.
So, Melissa, I saw this stat the other day that I thought was really, really fascinating, and I thought we should try to dive into it and maybe help make sense of it, because I like when statistics or ideas get contrasted in certain ways.
Yeah, right.
So
it makes them more meaningful.
Yeah. What's interesting about so many things in our lives is, and our human brains, is that, like, we need to compare. You know, we talk about comparing mind and how comparing's like not very good for you. Like, don't compare yourself to others.
Right,
you know,
right.
And things like that. But frankly, like, it's a human tendency to compare because it helps us understand, relative to things we already know, where other things fit.
Yes, I agree.
So, okay, but so this is from the U.S. Surgeon General.
Okay.
And the stat is, the risk of premature death from being socially disconnected is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day and represents a higher mortality impact than lack of physical activity and obesity.
Wow.
So just think about that.
Actually, can you read that again? Read it again one more time.
Yep. The risk of premature death from being socially disconnected is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Wow.
So if you come across someone who's, how many is 15 cigarettes? Is that like a pack? I have no idea.
I have no idea.
Let's say it's a pack. I don't know.
Yeah. It
seems like a lot to me, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Anyone who's smoking, I mean, obviously everyone knows the risk of smoking, or the lack of physical activity and obesity. I mean, these are common.
Yeah.
You
physical
look at
ailments,
those. Yeah, you look at those. And it's like,
conditions.
oh yeah, the risk of premature death from those things is higher.
Yes.
But the
it makes
idea
sense.
that being socially disconnected is worse than both of those,
I know.
that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and it's so sad.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yep. So the other little stat that was in here is that time spent with friends fell by 20 hours a month from 2003 to 2020. That was before the pandemic.
Oh my gosh.
That's a pre-pandemic stat. So
hey, did they know when did the cell phone come? When did the smartphone become a big thing? I wonder.
Oh, that's a great question. I feel like probably not quite 2003, but
right, that was a little early, maybe.
A little early, probably like the early adopters had it then. Well, we can probably find out pretty quick.
I was going to say when our children were in early middle school, which would be like 10 or 11, so that would put them that actually is 2007 to 2010. The kids were already getting phones. So this 2003 was probably right around the time that smartphones came out.
So yeah, I don't know if it's a smart phone thing, but just diving into this idea that social connection is a critical part of our health and
our physical health
is really interesting to me.
Yeah, I know. What's so funny is I was watching the morning show a couple weeks ago on Sunday morning, and it just is human interest stories. I just love watching that. And there was a story about a school bus full of kids that was on its way to school, and the driver of the bus started to have seizures and was having some sort of medical emergency. One child jumped up, ran, grabbed the steering wheel, and stood on the brake and stopped the bus and yelled
Wow.
for someone else to call 911. Okay. Here's the thing. Only one child.
Oh,
Only one child. All the rest of the children, and because they videotape, so now drivers, everything is they're constantly being videotaped, right? And so in this situation, you could watch the video and you could see no one was panicking. Like, this man was clearly having some sort of emergency, and only one child noticed. And here's the interesting thing: that child did not have a phone,
so they could see what was happening in there around them.
he could see what was happening, where the other kids all had phones. And they talked about situational awareness. They talked about the lack of situational awareness because people are so into their own worlds, whatever that might be, whether that be because of a phone or what have you. But I tie this back to this whole idea of being alone, even when you're not. It's like, that just blew me away.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Like, everybody's in their own tiny little private bubble,
Right.
and they're not interacting with each other in the way,
exactly.
like in the way that you and I would have
Right.
that school bus situation. What did you and I do when we were in school on the school bus? Like jumping around,
Jumped
messing
around,
with our friends.
tried to look out the window while other kids were like trying to take snacks out of our backpacks.
Yeah, right. There's all sorts of things happening.
Yeah.
And now everyone's just sort of like locked into their own little singular pod.
Yeah. So 20 hours a month. So, okay. Read that stat again. I gotta hear it again.
Time spent. So time spent with friends fell by 20 hours a month. So,
And
how many?
I wonder,
20 hours a month. Like, for us working adults, like in reality, right? Like, maybe we don't socialize maybe after work much, like with friends.
Right. Exactly.
We got
That's
the
what
weekends,
I was gonna say right
but
away.
we got to like. So I'm just trying to think, like, what's the general expectation? What does that turn into? Like, even if you did like 20 hours divided by 4 weeks,
yep.
it's like 5 hours per weekend.
It's a day. It's an hour after. Well, or it's an hour after work every day.
After work every day. Yeah.
Yeah. It is interesting because I feel like that's even before the pandemic, right? So now,
But it's worse now.
Well, it's worse a million times over, not just a little bit, because we were absolutely forced to be alone. And I do wonder about, I think it'd be important to talk about how we are alone. I think that's an important topic. I think loneliness is something that can happen in a myriad of ways, not just by physically being alone. I think that stat is, if you look at that stat from a physical well-being, it kind of is mind-blowing.
Yeah. So what I've been, we did this like pod on artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And one of the things I've been thinking about is what is the use of something like this artificial intelligence robot that you can chat with. So the chat GPT thing is interesting because it does more than just this utilitarian things like, go help me research a thing or whatever. You can have a conversation with it and it feels very authentic.
Yeah, it does.
And to some, like, so authentic that it's kind of creepy.
Yeah.
But the thing I was thinking about was if there is an epidemic of loneliness in our country and someone who is fairly isolated or doesn't have other people to interact with, if they were to interact with something like an AI system, is that bad? Like, there's a little bit of like a moral dilemma here because if it makes them healthier by making them feel like they have a social connection, is that good or bad? We should not get into that, but it really
It's a
starts.
very interesting question.
It
Yeah.
really starts to make you think about like what is a social connection? Like what does that
Right.
actually mean? To me, it means like I feel like I'm being heard. It feels like I have an
Emotional
emotional
connection.
bond with someone
Right.
else.
Right. Right. Right.
Feel it makes me feel
That's
like
where I went too.
they are reciprocating that kind of
Yeah.
feeling. Obviously, you're not going to get that kind of authentic connection with a computer system, but it made me really start thinking about like what are those things that make you feel socially connected
Yeah.
in your
I
world, and what's
yeah.
the opposite of that?
Yeah. The other thing is, I can't help but think that when you talk about artificial intelligence, I mean, what's the first word?
Artificial. Yeah.
Yeah, right? And then, but you even talk about socially disconnected, and how that isn't good for your well-being. Like, what does it mean to be socially connected? And I think exactly what you were saying. It's like, it's an emotional bond. It's an emotional connection. It's an emotional, spiritual way to be in partnership with other human beings so that you don't feel alone. We are tribal animals. And even if you, like, how am I trying to articulate this? I guess what I'm trying to say is you can be around a lot of people and you can artificially show up just like an AI, or you can artificially show up, meaning you act a certain way, but you don't have the emotional connection still. And I think this is the prevalent problem that we're having right now. So regardless of the reasons why, whether it's technology, phones, AI, whatever, social media, like there's something that is removing our depth.
Yep. That's really interesting to think about, because you can see people who it looks like they are very socially connected, right? Like, oh
Yeah.
wow, that person has so many friends, they know so many people.
Yeah.
But if you get into it a little bit, you can tell that they are very lonely. Like those connections are
Absolutely.
those social connections, or their little social network is very thin, and it's not really
Yeah.
providing them the emotional like depth that they want.
Yes. Yes. And it's funny how I feel like a person's strength, internal strength, actually can work against them in this way, because they have a higher pain tolerance for loneliness. They have a higher pain tolerance to not force themselves to get themselves help, or force themselves into being more vulnerable
Yeah.
with people, because they have a higher pain tolerance. They can live uncomfortably and alone longer.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about. The other thing it made me think about is that we have, I think, especially in the United States, we have this culture that, like, if you're strong, like, independence is, like,
Yes.
strong, is like a good virtue.
Yeah.
And the way that will manifest is, like, if I can't do it on my own, if I can't, like,
Yeah.
persevere just by myself, then that's like a weakness.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's not really a great virtue. And like you said, that's not really how humans are built.
No, and actually, what you just described is also a very common way that men were raised, more than women even. That's a very common misconception that men have to be strong. And so it pulls men out of opportunities for them to lean into the support and love of their social connections, because they feel it's a weakness, because they've been taught that it's a weakness.
Yeah, because I have to, by myself, venture into the woods, get the kill, and drag it back to the tribe.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have to make it seem seamless. And then I have to be the support beam for everybody else in my family or in my circle.
Wow, you're making it sound hard to be a guy.
I think it is hard to be a guy
Well,
in a
thanks.
lot of ways.
You don't get a lot of credit.
Yeah. And I mean, it isn't just about men and women, but some of these social ideas, some of these social norms that we've had for years and years simply don't work. They simply don't work. But what happens is, if you feel more vulnerable, you're not going to have the strength to say, these social norms don't work for me. You're not going to do that. You know, we're having so many challenges with anxiety and people self-selecting off of this planet. And it's very much having to do with being misunderstood, which is through lack of connection.
So how do we get some of that back? You know, the idea that we are not spending as much time with friends. Maybe we are, you know, it can be very easy, like we've talked about before, to like maybe instead of reach out and chat or hang out with our friends, to just like play our games on our phones, or endlessly scroll through Facebook, which is, again, it's not like, that's not like TikTok. A true connection. That's just more like voyeurism of our friends.
Well, it's actually falsifying the narrative still is what's happening. We watch that endlessly to get a sense of what normal is, and none of that's normal.
Yeah. So what do you think? Like, what are some like easy things that we can do to start regaining some of those, like, or building some of that social connection?
Yeah. You know, both of my children in their mid-20s, early 20s, both of them at times have pulled all social media stuff off of their electronic stuff, laptops and phones. So I think there's a number of tactical things, but here's the thing I would say. This is what comes up for me. You can be in a room full of people you've known for 20 years and feel so lonely. You can be out with two of your very best friends and feel alone. And I think that the key to that is your own personal willingness to be vulnerable. If you're not willing to let people in, it's hard for people to get in. You know? And maybe that's okay for 75% of your day, but what about the 25 where it's not? If you constantly have a barricade around you and you've packed it with a bunch of stuff so it looks AKA normal, socially acceptable, when you hit rock bottom, what do you do? You know? So I think, to me, one of the hardest things is to just tell somebody, I just am not feeling good. I am feeling depressed. I am feeling sad. I need some help. Like, we have such a hard time saying those things. And yet, every time we do with people that we love, we are, 99% of the time when we do, we're rewarded richly.
Yep.
And that connection can absolutely cut through all of the things that have stopped us. You know?
Yeah.
So that's the first thing that comes up, is it's like, I would want to say, not to everybody, you should, it's not that. But for me, I'll tell you, when I feel lonely and when I feel at my wit's end, because we all do, it's almost always because I have put myself in a little insulated hole, and I'm not allowing anyone else to help me.
Yeah, that's really good perspective. It really does start with you.
Yeah, and it feels scary. It feels scary to ask for help. It feels scary to appear vulnerable even if you don't ask for help. You know, some people actually may not want help. They just want to be heard. And simply being heard makes them feel connected.
Yeah.
You know, like, so I think, like, for me, if I'm just self-choosing what I would do to answer your question, how can I change that? The first thing is, to me, it would be just like, if I need to, I will make a commitment to myself to be more vulnerable to the people that I love. And then the second thing is that sometimes it's rather complex, the stuff that I'm feeling. And I might not honestly trust people to be able to answer for me like I know how to answer for me. But even just being able to hear from someone or hear that someone's listening. Like, I don't want you to solve this for me. I just need you to hear me.
Yep.
Is also something that requires you being able to articulate your feelings. And I don't think we're used to doing that.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, like usual, you're in this like beautifully deep emotional space with it. Much more like practical cookies on the bottom shelf kind of thing.
But that's important, though, because there's a lot of people that don't want to be in a deep emotional space, and they do want to eat the cookies.
Like, ooh, I better think about what Melissa's saying, but what I'm actually going to do is different. Well, so this is the okay, when I think about socially disconnected, I mean, yes, everything you said.
Yes,
But here's the other thing that I think about is like we've got, and maybe it's, I don't know, it's me or my circle or whatever, but it's like the only time I really, like maybe interact with a lot of people I know, it's like event based, right? It's just like, hey, like let's get together and go do a thing. Right?
Yes.
And if there's no like event on the calendar, then I just don't do anything. The one exception is like and just because of I don't know, maybe my personality or whatever, it's not like I like randomly want to just go hang out and almost do nothing with somebody.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
What's the purpose
that doesn't
here?
Happen.
Like I'm right. What's the purpose of
we have to have an activity.
There's no purpose. Then I'm going back and whatever. Going back to cleaning my closet. But I think there is a lot of value in actually not having an activity to go do with somebody. Sometimes I'll like hang out with one of my neighbors in the neighborhood here, and we don't really have any agenda. And it's actually pretty great. It's just like just sit around in the yard and like whatever, talk about how we need to like stain the decks and complain about why the grass grows so fast. The part of our society has lost this idea that like we are just living in our little tribe, and a lot of life is kind of nothing. Right? It's kind of like a lot of, I wouldn't say wasting time, but a lot of life is just not very exciting. But that part's okay, and that's actually kind of where the value of that connection comes in. It's
I really like that.
It doesn't have
to
be around big events,
right? And I also like the other thing I was thinking as you were kind of describing this idea that you had that things are around events. I started thinking, that's another thing that actually happens with a lot of people when they are not in a good space is they stop planning. They stop planning things and making themselves get out of their house. So I think it is just kind of on that continuum. It's like, how are you doing with that? Like, are you at least like maybe once a week saying this is helpful for me to have a plan to not be in my house, to not sit on my deck. I'm going to go out and do something or just ask someone to hang out and just be on their deck.
Yeah. Or,
just spend time with someone.
Yeah. Like, hey,
schedule it.
We both got to go grocery shopping. You want to go grocery shopping together? Have you ever grocery shopped with one of your friends? It's actually pretty fun.
I hate grocery shopping. Grocery shopping.
Go with one of your friends. It's going to be way more fun.
The last time I went with a girlfriend to Costco, I hate Costco so much. I walked in, panicked. She said, okay, fine, stand with the cart right here. Don't move. I'm just going to bring stuff to you. So you're right. I did feel supported. Oh, this is a good conversation. I think it's just a great time I think it's a really great time to think about our relationship with ourselves and our relationship with being willing to be in partnership, to be in connection with someone else other than just a surface.
Yeah, and I'd say you were talking about how internally you should make sure you're not putting up walls and barriers or isolating yourself.
Yeah.
And the other thing I think is worth mentioning is we can see that in others, right? And trying to reach out to others that we see are maybe getting themselves in that hole.
Yeah.
And not forcing them out of their hole, but try to
be there with them.
Yeah, be there with them, or help them build a little ladder. One
Well,
rung at
and
a
I
time.
think that's right. And I think too, the other really, really big thing in that exact example is to don't take it personally if someone doesn't grab your life rope. Your rope.
Yeah.
If they don't want to yet, that's okay. It's not a reflection on you. They're just not in a space yet, but just stay with them.
My mom did one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. With my aunt who recently passed away. And so her husband, my uncle, passed away, I don't know, 3 years ago, maybe.
I remember that.
My mom called my aunt every single day at 5:00 for like 5 years in a row.
Wow.
Right? So talk about because she was living in an assisted living home, right? She didn't have, she had some interaction there. But my mom being there for her, in that social connection way, didn't matter what they talked about. It was just,
or how long they talked or anything.
I mean, it was many days where they just talked about the same thing that they talked about the day before. But I just thought it was just so amazing and beautiful that my mom was there for her for that immense period of time.
No kidding. Mrs. Parker's the best.
She sure is.
She's such a good example. Yeah. Great conversation. I hope it helps people. I mean, I actually feel good about this conversation in that it's kind of given me a chance to check my own inventory, and tying it back to the physicality is interesting to me. I never even thought of that.
Yeah. Yep. Did you enjoy this episode? Please go to your favorite podcast platform to subscribe, rate, and leave a review so others can discover it as well.
Growing self-awareness is a lifelong journey, and there's always further to go. And it's better when we're all in it together. Please think of someone you know who could benefit from hearing today's conversation and share this episode with them. We can't thank you enough for listening. Until next time, happy exploring, seekers.